Hi, I'm Joe Saunders with Miniature Landscape Hobbies, and in this episode, we're going to do things a little different. Earlier in February, I was interviewed by Canadian Wargaming Podcast. This is an awesome podcast made to help join Canadian wargamers together and foster the community in our country. During the interview, they asked me lots of questions about my background, and I thought it might be interesting. So I'm going to put the details up here and you can watch as you see fit. So without any more further ado, let's get straight to the interview. Please enjoy.
James, quite excited. Here we are at episode 11, and we have a homegrown guest who is actually not that far as the crow flies from either of us. So we're very, very happy tonight to have Joe Saunders as our guest. So let's bring him on. Joe, how are you?
Oh, great. How are you guys?
Good.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast, mate. Joe, just to introduce, you are the proprietor of Miniature Landscape Hobbies, which is a YouTube channel.
That's correct. Yep.
You have a long and interesting gaming and modeling background that we're very happy to get in. So why don't you just introduce yourself and maybe give us a short biography of you as a modeler and gamer, and then we'll get up to the present day and yak.
Oh, sure thing. Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, I'm Joe Saunders from Miniature Landscape Hobbies. I've been in the model wargaming community since Rogue Trader, if you're a 40K guy. So been at it for a long time, probably about 30 years. I'm generally more fond of I like wargaming. I love wargaming, but I am definitely one of those people that sort of dwells on the artistic side of the hobby, particularly terrain. I guess I got my start in wargaming like a lot of people. I was invited to role play with some friends of the family and started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Started reading Dragon magazine and found out about this amazing thing called Warhammer 40,000 at the time and Warhammer Fantasy. And I was lucky enough, my family ran a store in downtown Collingwood at the time. And our store was, in those days, stores were, even though it was an office supply store, it had a lot more of a general store kind of feel. And so I put in my own gaming section when I was maybe in like 14 or 15 years old.
Oh, that's a dream.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was like, I couldn't complain. Ran a little gaming section out of my family business for quite a few years, went to university. So I had to give that up. When I got back from university, didn't have much time for gaming during university, and then went to Waterloo, but kept in touch with the wargaming scene, particularly on the GW side. And then when I graduated and got married, I went back to playing mainly Warhammer 40,000. Loved it, ate, breathed, slept. Particularly the artistic side, but all of Games Workshop gaming, and to the point where I just couldn't afford to stay in the hobby to the level that I was interested at the time with a young family and just married. But then I found a program that Games Workshop had at the time called the Outriders. And what it was is basically you would just volunteer and join into Games Workshop. They would send you to events, they'd send you to conventions to teach painting, terrain building, run tournaments, which really wasn't my thing, but you could run tournaments, you could run mega battles. And I was at it for many years, 8 or 9 years probably. Met a lot of friends, was in and out of the Canadian Games Workshop HQ for quite a long time, went to all the Canadian Games days, participated in them, and just had an absolute riot. I'm still in touch with, that would be don't know, 20 years ago. I'm still in touch with most of the guys in the group on and off in one capacity or another. And it was there for a while. And then one Canadian Games Day, we walked in and there were American executives, Games Workshop executives everywhere. And I turned to the guy who was traveling with me and I said, oh crap, that's it. And that night they made an announcement that the Canadian Games Workshop division was being closed and amalgamated to the US.
I remember that.
The U.S. division was going to take care of us, so it was okay. All the Grey Knights and Outriders. We were called Grey Knights by then, but all the same thing. They're going to take care of us, and the state of the hobby would never be better. And we never heard from them. So I gave up. That Games Day was the last time I picked up a paintbrush to paint a Games Workshop model. In fact. I had other stuff going on at the time, business and family and stuff. Yeah. So I was off gaming for 12 years or so, until my sons were old enough to come back, and I decided I was going to build them a games table to play tanks, like the entry level Flames of War. And when I picked up the paintbrush to refurbish one of my old tables to get it ready for them, I just simply never put the paintbrush down. It was like coming home. All the artistic juices got flowing, and then Miniature Landscape Hobbies was the natural progression from there. Mm-hmm. So I hope that's not too long-winded.
No, we're here to talk about you.
Yeah.
We're bored about talking about us. We can talk about us all the time.
Well, I will listen to 3 or 4 of the episodes, 3 or 4 of the podcast episodes. So I'm quite happy to hear about you guys.
Oh, well, we are fascinating.
Well, you are very fascinating and championing the cause in Canadian wargaming, which is of course excellence. So we need.
We're all hiding in our log cabins and beaver lodges out in the woods, and we don't know where each other are. So that's why we have to do this
in the woods.
Well,
in snow.
That's the case. So you guys actually aren't living too far from where I am, and I wasn't aware of that. I was listening to the podcast for a while. I was listening to one of the episodes last night, I think, and one of you guys mentioned Barrie, and I'm like, what? Oh, that's like a 20 minutes from here. So
going back to, do you have an arts background? Because you've mentioned a couple of times that you have an artistic side, and I've noticed listening to you that you talk and think like an artist. Like you understand shapes, you understand materials. Is that all self-taught, or did you have some arts training?
I learned that by osmosis. I had no other option. My wife is a graduate of fine arts, so my personal background is all social science. So I never really took art in any meaningful way. Didn't take any art classes at high school or anything of the sort. Just learned it from what I've read and picked up and studied on the side. And my father is a pretty accomplished artist. He ran the arts co-op, or was on the board of directors of the arts co-op here in Collingwood for many years, and he's an acrylic and watercolor painter. So I'm surrounded by artists. I'm just very lucky that way to have no shortage of inspiration. On the other side of the curtain here, the reason why I've got the ugly orange tarp, or now these curtains that don't match, is that on the other side is my wife's studio, and my wife makes pottery. So far more prolific than I am with miniature landscape hobbies, even with pottery. But it's art central over here. My sons have my sons have a Lego spread that's probably like a Lego town that they've been building for many years. It's probably 20 feet worth of table space. So yeah, lots of art, lots of creating.
It sounds amazing. Yeah.
And certainly, when you're talking about when you started with 40K, like back in Rogue Trader, and like I'm not a huge fantasy guy. Like I resisted 40K, but I remember reading, a friend of mine subscribed to White Dwarf, and I would borrow the magazine every month and read it faithfully because it was just so inspiring.
Yes. Yeah.
Like just all the great, like back then, Games Workshop really inspired a lot of creativity. Which
it was to me. To me, it was the golden age. Like I was pretty fortunate that the just the enthusiasm and love for the hobby. Like you make a beautiful hobby and everything, all the other parts fall into place, right? The business takes care of itself. Now, I don't know. I don't really think that's true, but that was the philosophy in those days. And it really was a great time to be just a creator. The community was tight knit, but it was good. I mean, it was a wonderful group of people to be involved with. It doesn't exist anymore. So
yeah,
I don't really, you could get into a lot of the GW sessions where people are bad mouthing GW or speaking negatively about it. And, like it's probably not fair because it's a business. It's designed like a business, and it is a business, and that's the way it works. But I was fortunate enough to be around in the I don't know, like the honeymoon period, I suppose, for the mindset where it was all growth and all creativity. And I mean, like I was surrounded by Golden Demon winners. And people that were producing the traveling terrain spreads for GW. I helped out a little bit with some of it, and it was just you couldn't not learn to be like pick up on the creative energy.
Some of your terrain might have been at Hot Lead because a couple of years we had Games Workshop Canada, because I was friends with the president at the time. He ran, like he brought some people down and ran 40K tournaments for a couple of years until until the plug got pulled.
So some of that stuff I may have helped out with. I ended up painting a lot of little goblin creatures coming into ogre kingdoms.
Okay.
I mean, trying to think of some of the stuff I did. I made some buildings for them. I made a tall ship kind of boat. That was a really fun project, actually. So there were some really, really neat projects. And then in there I met like James Craig, Jason Dyer, Jim Smith. Like James Craig is the head judge of the Crystal Brush. So like there was some phenomenal people in there to really boost your hobby skills and your inspiration. And I still carry it around with me. I can't talk highly enough about that period and what those people did for the hobby of miniature gaming. When GW Canada kind of evaporated and I had a decade of artist block, right, where I just simply couldn't pick up a paintbrush, and I like trucked around and did other hobbies and stuff. It was never the same. But I always still look back really, really fondly on that. And then when I picked up wargaming again, maybe 5-6 years ago, it just all came crashing back. So
Yeah, that sounds like a really healthy way to view it, Joe. I mean, we've talked on this show in past on our podcast about Games Workshop, love them or hate them. I mean, the fact is, it is what it is, and it has an amazing legacy. And we talked a couple of episodes back with, gamers in their 30s who've come into what we would call the hobby that we love, historical miniatures gaming, in part through Games Workshop, right? And their value today as a gateway is huge, and
Oh, yeah, for
what they do on their own is, I mean, you have to admire them for making a viable, profitable business out of it. And there's lots of people who are imitating them in their own at their own scales, like Warlord Games or whatever. So they are what they are, and it sounds like you just have a huge sort of personal legacy that you took from those years.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty influential for well, everybody I know that was involved in the group, actually. Like I said, we're all still the Grey Knights or Outriders. Most of us are still talking, and in some of us more limited than others on friendly terms. A lot of us don't game anymore. Some of us do, but there's still a wealth of knowledge there. And then, of course, like as you're saying, like a lot of people, the gateway drug. So that there's a Flames of War T-34 sitting beside me, and I got French Dragoons right there, 3 feet to my left. So when I walked away from the sci-fi side, I went pretty heavily into historicals. So one of the things I like about historicals, of course, is that a Sherman tank today is a Sherman tank tomorrow and is a Sherman tank next week. So there won't be some new hotness that's, an 8-foot tall kit that has, laser cannons that didn't exist last edition. Causing power creep and making all your hard-earned efforts useless
and a Sherman tank is a Sherman tank no matter which set of rules you play.
Exactly. Right? Like in Flames Edition 5, a Sherman tank will still, my Sherman tanks will still look right. So they'll still, unless history gets rewritten somehow. So yeah, and of course, historicals. The thing about historicals too is that it creates a better context for the art of building in miniature. So not to say, like, I'm not knocking sci-fi or fantasy where you can like let your imagination run wild. It's great to do those projects, but when you're like me now and you sort of dwell at the intersection of the games side and the hey everybody take a look, this is the art side. Right. When you're building stuff that the casual observer can appreciate or wrap their head around what it is, then it puts your creation in context. And I think that's pretty important for bringing people into the hobby that want to approach it from more of a mature point of view. I don't know how to say it. Like, people, there's nothing wrong with giant robots on the battlefield. I'm a big fan of giant robots on the battlefield, but for your average person, they don't know what a giant robot is, but they know what a Sherman tank is. They know what a Tiger tank is. They know what the red coats and the blue coats. So.
Yeah, and you can go down the mecha rabbit hole and hear people have fascinating discussions about mecha things that I don't understand. So there's giant robots have their own allure and their own lore and their backstories and their own competing franchises, and that's fine. I get it. But yeah, you're right about how you can come back to Napoleonics or World War II or whatever, and you've got a more or less a kind of common language, right? And
I find sometimes the problem with like fantasy or sci-fi is you have to buy the fluff, right? Otherwise, you get into, well, what do you mean you've got 10 giant robots or a dragon or whatever? Like, you can't, at least with historicals, you can always pull out a history book and go, look, okay, they didn't have king tigers when they invaded Poland, so no, you can't bring king tigers into this game.
Yeah. That reminds me, my son. So Mitchell it would be a couple of years ago. I probably would have been 14. Was at a his school went on a field trip to the I don't know, museum somewhere, and they were showing them a film of World War II, and it was about the start of Operation Barbarossa, and they cut to a film of a panther driving by. And my son waited till the video ended and went to the person curating that portion of the museum and ripped the shit out of them. Of course, there were no panthers at the time. So I was
Good for him.
That's my boy.
You've raised Mitch well. Good for you, Joe. You've raised him well.
Yeah, that was, I should say that I was proud, not proud, but proud at the time for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sloppy video editing's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, people don't dwell on those nuances. Maybe they, in that case, that's real history, so maybe they should, but but they don't, and war gamers do. It's part and parcel of the hobby, and of course he had he knew that from what he had studied. There's an interesting thing about historicals that I would recommend to people that were sitting on the fence as to whether or not they were getting into historicals, maybe from the GW route or from playing War Machine or other fantasy games, LOTR or whatever, is that when you come over to play some historicals, the fluff background is infinite, because and it's everywhere because it's real history, right? It's real history. So
Yeah.
So want to learn about you want to paint some tiger tanks, well, you can go on YouTube or find any amount of free resources. You'll never run out of depth on the matter. I'm trying to wrap my head around Napoleonics color schemes right now. Exactly. But my worry with the hobby, my worry with my hobbies is that the well isn't deep enough, that there's a bottom to the well. Like at some point in time, you'll know everything there is to know, or you'll have mastered every technique that you're going to need to master. And it's, it's impossible, but you want something that just keeps going and going and going. Like, oh, look, I learned about how to paint terrain or models in enamels. Oh, that's great. Oh, but on the other side of enamels, there's oils, oh, now I got to learn how to use oils. And then, so on and so forth. You want one of those hobbies, where you're always discovering and learning. Yeah. That's sort of my mission statement with Miniature Landscape Hobbies. When I started, it was, if you look at all the different aspects of building a miniature, like I happen to be a war gamer, but I love a good train spread as much as anybody else. Heck, I mean, I'm fascinated by doll houses. There's just so much out there in terms of skills and ideas that you can like cross-pollinate in and out of the hobby.
Oh yeah.
And so when I started Miniature Landscape Hobbies, the plan was to look around and borrow from these other disciplines of building a miniature and blurring the lines. And I figured that I would be able to take my knowledge within wargaming and terrain building and share it elsewhere too. And every time I end up in a discussion with somebody over something I'm doing on the channel, and I find out that they're from outside of the wargaming community, I get really, really excited about it. They find out, somebody that's I had a lady contact me, it'll be maybe about a month ago, a little more than a month ago. I actually did a video on it. I got her permission. She was trying to build a diorama on the top of her, on the top of a bookcase in her house. And she had all the supplies to the diorama. Most of it was store-bought stuff, and she had made some of it herself, and she was doing an excellent job. She was new to it, but she was doing an excellent job. The thing was that she had nothing to put in the back corner, in the line of sight and so it was just plain wall, and it was no good. It was messing up her diorama. So she wanted something that could go in that space, but it was like specific kind of wedge shape, and so she couldn't build it herself. So she contacted me for a commission and gave me the dimensions of the space. Eventually, I ended up building a triangular hill, and the way the perspective of what she was building went is like it kind of started gradual, but then it got steep, so it created an impression of being more like in the distance. And she sent me pictures of it since then, and it looks great. I'm really happy that her diorama is turning out so well. She's really, really pleased with it, and now I've got a good friend. I can trade model building ideas with all day long. But I built that for her using, like, she was using techniques like you'd use to build like a Christmas village.
Right.
It wasn't a snow scene, but like that sort of stuff. And I built her the hills using, like stacked styrofoam technique, like,
Right.
miniature gamers have been using since before Rogue Trader. And we got to combine the two different skill sets. So
Yeah,
that's great.
and it's always the problem making dynamic, exciting terrain that's still playable.
yes, yeah. Well, you have that. You have that too. I just completed. So for the North Africa launch, I just completed some. And I know this is a podcast. I'm holding up models in the background, but
It looks great, folks. Trust us, it looks great.
It's a lovely little walled field with a camel.
Yeah. So this is I'm preparing something for the product launch for North Africa, and we'll have videos on this, but I've got to do something interesting that tells a story, but it also has to have enough space in it to fit the models.
Yeah.
So when you're designing a piece of terrain, you need to be mindful of what's going, on the terrain, or how the game is going to interact with the terrain. And that's just this part of it.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with the ideas of dioramas. So when I build terrain, I try to make it more than just a utilitarian piece of wargaming terrain. I also try to make it, tell a story or have a position in time and space.
Uh-huh. So I don't know if you're familiar with Ken Riley. He's a Brit, and he has a podcast called The Yorkshire Gamer. But one of the things that he asks people is he has this thing called the Venn diagram of wargaming, and I guess in your case, one of the things that I'm curious about is obviously, Joe, you're super motivated by the artistic side. You also describe yourself as a gamer, and I think Ken would add a third category to that, which would be, are you a painter, artist? Are you a gamer, or are you a collector? So there's, I guess all of us tend to fall in to some extent or other, and more of us would be in one of those categories than the other, kind of like Myers-Briggs or something like that. Are you more introverted?
Yeah.
So where would you describe yourself? Like, what motivates you, maybe besides the artistic side, or is that primarily what drives you?
No, I love the game. I love the game. There's nothing like exercising your brain in a war game. To try to marshal all of your resources in miniature, in a small scale, and then achieve a result, within the context of a rule set. It's awesome. Plus it's just so much fun to get together with people. I visited the competitive scene a few times and did not like it. So I'd like 2/3 art, 1/3 gaming is great. And telling a story, a narrative through a war game is far more rewarding than trouncing an opposing player, mind you. Briefly being able to reach out and touch a period of history, even in an extremely superficial kind of way through a war game, is another rewarding aspect of it. if you take that Venn diagram and you went on the collector side, I would have to say, but by default, I'm not a collector because if I did, then I wouldn't fit in my house. All my model collections would have pushed me. My stuff I had from the GW days would have pushed me out the door a long time ago. Thank God I'm not a hoarder because it wouldn't happen. And I do find myself. I build terrain. I guess you couldn't call it professionally, but I build terrain as maybe a semi-pro, and you build your babies and put your art into your terrain or some of your models. I don't do a lot of model painting commissions, but I do terrain commissions, and you send them out the door. You just couldn't keep it. You just couldn't keep it. That's my Etsy store is basically sitting on top of my game table over there. Next week somebody's going to buy a hill or a bunker or something off the table, and I'll take it off. And so inspirational hit, and I'll build a newer one. I'll build a newer one a month or two later.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, and I'd love to talk more about the Etsy store. But I wanted just to ask you about how can I put this without sounding crude? Okay, I'll be blunt. In all of your adventure, your hobby history, was there a day job that kept you going, or like how much are you able to support yourself by doing all this cool stuff?
Not enough. Not even remotely. No, you need like a day job. So I owned that business when I came back from university. I ended up owning that business where I ran that little game. The family store. Yeah. And I owned it I ran it 20 some years. And then I sold it. And went and sold it, became a marketing consultant. So I've been doing some primarily in real estate marketing consultancy, and so that's generally my 9 to 5.
And that piece you were holding up, that desert piece a few minutes ago, as part of the North Africa launch. Can you talk a bit about that? Because that's something you're doing in conjunction with Battlefront. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was, boy, talk about I don't know, just sort of the right place, the right time, maybe a little bit. Battlefront a few years ago, right on Facebook, asked for people that wanted to contribute articles for writing, and at the time I was needing to up my blog game for a client I was working with. And so I thought, well, I'll write some articles for Battlefront and scrape off some rust, and I'll be able to write about some history and some gaming stuff, some stuff I love, and practice my blog writing skills at the same time. And I started writing it, and I did a couple articles for them on terrain, because as I'm working on it in the basement, I might as well record it and send it to them. And they started putting them on their website. Breakthrough Assault as well has a couple of my articles, and they really, really just took off. Like, I had people contacting me on Facebook, are you the guy that built the railway cannon, the 1/100 scale railway cannon from foam core? I was like, yeah. And then they started asking me questions. The interest started passing on, and finally one day I'm having a discussion with Luke over at Luke over at Battlefront, and there was a new release coming up, and I was, okay, well, what do you want me to work on? And he's like, terrain. I said, oh, okay, well, I'm happy to do terrain. I was hoping maybe I could get my hands on some new models I could do, like some new tanks or something I could do painting demo on, but no, we want you to do terrain. And I said, okay, is it okay if I do it as a video then? And so then it turned into a partnership. And so now when they do their live launches, the terrain content is produced by Miniature Landscape Hobbies. And I get a a look at the I get a look at the early release stuff with the books and so forth, and a little bit of compensation in strictly hobby supplies, and it works great. It's a dream arrangement, and I couldn't imagine a better crew of people to work with. The people at Battlefront are just, everyone I've met over there is just a saint. Just understands that the way to run a game is to feed the imagination of the hobbyist. And
yeah, I mean their terrain at their tournaments and stuff always looks amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They really understand the terrain and good looking armies work together.
Yes.
Yeah. Like you can have the best looking army in the world and you put it on just crap terrain and it's going to look like junk. You gotta have a good table too.
They have that idea dialed in, I think, pretty well, and they certainly respect it in terms of how they do their marketing, and they reach out. So in my opinion, they reach out so well to us gamers, and it's nice to have a business that has a bit of a two-way conversation going on with its people. Mm-hmm. I really appreciate it.
I've always gotten good service from Battlefront. The pieces I've made from them. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I feel sorry for the supply issues of all up and down. Of course, it cuts across every industry right now. But
yeah.
That's such a dilemma about the amount of time that like an individual hobbyist as opposed to somebody who's in a British style club has. And then sorry, there's my computer again. I'll edit that out. James hates my Swedish computer that tells the time on the hour in Swedish. It's a long story. But like if you think of your three pots, right, of available time, you've got miniatures painting, then you've got terrain modeling, and then you've got actually gaming, right? And I'm always struggling as to how much time and effort I have to put into each of those three pots. And I totally get what James says, right? I can do a really nice army, but if I've got like an old blanket, and maybe with some books underneath it to be hills, then, unless you really dig that old school 1960s Donald Featherstone wargaming vibe, that's not going to cut it, right? But then, do I invest my time in terrain, or do I find somebody like Joe with an Etsy store to buy really nice stuff from so I can focus on the things that I'm good at, right? It's always a struggle.
Good balance,
Yeah.
James
does that well, I think.
It is a balance. I always found that it's funny. I always found that whenever I tried to compromise, well, on the terrain side, anyways, when I try to compromise, I'm not happy with whatever I do. So I never end up doing any project halfway. I always do it all the way.
Yeah.
So scheduling and creating a timeline for my what I do is at the core of how it works. So having Miniature Landscape Hobbies as a YouTube channel and the live stream component, and when I want to get items in the Etsy store, is a really good motivator, because it's like, well, tomorrow I've got a live stream, and I asked my audience what they wanted. They wanted to hear about how to sculpt styrofoam. So I'm like, oh, okay. I don't have any like styrofoam blanks of any hills. Usually I've got some styrofoam blanks around, like of a partly built hill or whatever. So before I came on here with you guys, I was furiously building naked styrofoam hills so I could demonstrate tomorrow. But then I had to build half a dozen hills. Well, that's good to get me off my butt, because I'll have half a dozen more hills than I had before. So I'm always trying to set deadlines. Like this weekend, Mitchell and I are supposed to, getting ready to play Black Powder. We're still both learning, and we weren't having terribly great luck with our games with just the one starter set we have, because I had some Calvary, didn't have any. And so, it created a deadline for this weekend. The Calvary needs to be ready. So, and it's actually ready as of right now. I've got to varnish it. But so, like, we're always setting ourselves deadlines of what has to happen, and then next, and then next.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Maybe we could, that would be a good segue. By the way, you almost ruined our family rating by holding up naked styrofoam to the camera. It's a good thing this is just
I think I swore too, so
okay. James does all the time. This would be a good segue to talk about your YouTube channel, Joe. How long have you been working on it? How much of your time and focus does it take? It sounds like it's kind of a driver to what you do right now.
It's 13 months old, 14 months old. So it would have been in December of last year, not 2021, 2020. I turned my camera on my games table and walked around it, and I put it on YouTube to just satisfy some of the questions that I was getting about my terrain from the Battlefront articles.
Right.
And in those days, I thought maybe I'd call it Battlescapes, but I changed. And so then I just put it up to see what would happen, and I got a lot of interest in it. So then my day job trade is as a brand, branding and marketing. So I'm like, oh, maybe I'll build a brand around it and just see what happens. And so I tested the waters and picked up 100 subscribers in, I don't know, a very short amount of time. And so I just kept vlogging it. And as I said, soon it was scratching my itch for both, like, doing the art. It was an excuse to up the ante in terms of my skills, where I might settle if it was just me ever looking at it. Then my hills could be plain green lumps, but my viewers don't want to see plain green lumps. They want to see hills with camels and nice trees and stuff. And so it was a way to sort of force my hand to improve my art. And again, when I started with Battlefront, I was trying to kill two birds with one stone by improving my blog writing skills. Well, I needed to develop some video editing skills for my real estate side of what I was doing. And so again, I could kill two birds with one stone. So I'm putting a lot of steam behind Miniature Landscape Hobbies while I have the time to, when I put, half a dozen episodes together and throw them in an external hard drive and have them wait until I'm ready to put them up. I used to do 2 a week, and my initial plan was to do 2 a week, but it was pretty hard to keep up with that pace when life was getting in the way. So now I do 1 a week and then a live stream usually on Thursday, but I'm gonna have to maybe change the frequency of the live stream just with some stuff that's going on with one of my sons going back and forth to school. But that's how I'm running it now, and I'm just keep putting square pegs into round holes until I find a pattern that works for the viewers. But I've certainly I'm so happy with the number of people that have become loyal viewers, and that I can't believe it, that people like wait for my episodes to come out, and are asking me when the next episode's coming out, and wanting to talk to me about it. And I mean, I've got someone on Patreon. It's like they really care. They really are interested in the stuff, and that in itself is pretty rewarding. So
yeah, well, I can understand without wanting to feed your ego, Joe. I just watching your latest live stream on terrain making, I learned a ton, and I thought to myself, And I was watching it while I was on the elliptical machine, and I thought, I need to sit down with a pen and take notes like I'm in a lecture. Some of the stuff you were talking about, like I've been basing my terrain the same way for 15 years, and I wonder sometimes when I try to make a piece of terrain, why does it bend like that? How can I fix that? And you answered a ton of questions, and I thought, geez, I need to take this really seriously and learn from it. So you have
I'm achieving my
yeah. You're a gifted teacher. You're really good at explaining things, and you've got a ton of knowledge. It just totally shows.
well my night job is I'm a martial arts instructor too. So I am used to of course can't do that right now because of COVID. All the rec plexes and things are shut down. Well, hopefully it's opening up in March, but so I like to teach, I find it rewarding to teach, but you wouldn't need to, in your case, Mike, you wouldn't need to like sit down and take notes and think of it so formally. You would just wait until COVID lockdowns are done, and then you either come over here or I'll go over there, and we'll collaborate on some projects. Since you're only in Barrie, of all things.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Tell me about the Etsy store. You mentioned on your live stream you were hoping to bring it to Hot Lead, and we really devoutly hope that we'll see you there because the trend with COVID here is looking better and better now. Looks like
yeah. Well, I'm very excited. I want to know more about. I used to, back in the GW days with Games Day. Of course, I looked forward to the convention so much. So knowing that Hot Lead is coming up, I'm really excited about that to sort of get back to it. There's no way I can't come and run a game, so you can count me in for that.
Okay.
On the Etsy side, the Etsy store kind of happened as a way to try to actually just fuel Miniature Landscape Hobbies, because as I'm building and building and building, I've got let's say 12 or 14 feet of game table space in my house, and doing a terrain project, sometimes 2 terrain projects a week. It was causing a bit of an issue in terms of things, me just getting squished out the door by terrain. So I opened up the store. I had done the odd commission previously. So I just opened up the store to try to thin the cull the herd a little bit in terms of the models that were there. And I haven't sold a lot, but I get a fair number of visitors and a lot of interest. And I'm of course not. There's no secret recipe to any of the terrain I build. If you point to something and say, "How do you build that?" In fact, that's what tomorrow night's YouTube live cast is actually about, that people wanting to know how I build my rocky hills. I'll tell you, I'd rather, I'd be just as happy for you to build it yourself. But for Hot Lead, I'll pack up the store and bring it with me, and I'll have, I won't have a lot of stuff. I'll probably have 30 or 40 decent pieces of terrain that, are, I tend to finish it to diorama quality, but I'll have 30 or 40 pieces of terrain that I'll bring with me. And if people are so inclined to pick some of that stuff up, then great. If they want to know how to build it themselves, then great. I wrote a custom scenario for, I don't think it actually ever got used, for Battlefront a few years ago now, where the Hit the Beach box comes with that V1 rocket. They have a V1 rocket. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I made a launch site for it for one for an article on their website, and it got really good. Response. I built the whole launch site with the launch bunker and the launch rail for the rocket, and I decided to put some ground crew down. I put like a janitorial staff standing up behind the bunker. But as I put the models down, I'm like, how am I going to make these guys look like a janitorial staff? I'm going to have to build a mop for them. So I couldn't find a mop in 1/100 anywhere. So you know how hard it is to build a model of a mop in 1/100. But
Yeah.
anyways,
Probably pretty
I
hard
did.
to do it convincingly.
Yes, yeah, it wasn't. It's not my finest work, but anyway, so I built that, and I built a scenario around that where you're trying to fuel the rocket and prepare it while the Allies are attacking the site. So, and I've got some custom terrain for it. So I was thinking I'd probably run that one day. Do more planning as it gets a little closer to. I've got to start thinking about that. I was, of course, hoping that. Like my wife's a teacher, so usually that's over March break, right? So usually March break is the only time I can get away with the family. This year we can't go anywhere. So
I've had people complain about, but it's just like there's no matter when I schedule Hot Lead, I'm going to be like it's March break or it's Cold Wars or it's Adepticon.
that's just life.
You're running, or if I go later in the spring, I start running into the festival here in town, and then no one can get a hotel room.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like I
well,
put it when it's convenient for me.
Well, it's a happy situation for me this year because we can't go anywhere, and so I go to Stratford. Like
the Yard is a nice hotel.
Yeah.
Bring the wife. She can go shopping.
That's what yep, it's a nice hotel.
I might end up staying with my in-laws. They live in Waterloo, but we'll see. I kind of want to. I kind of want to see if we can stay at the hotel because I want Mitch to see Miss Mitchell come down with me. I want Mitch to see how fun gaming conventions are.
Well, I'm excited. I can't wait. So we're getting close to wrapping up. So I just want to start heading towards the exit, but I wanted to ask you, Joe, about your sense of being a Canadian gamer. Like in this podcast, we've described what is a Canadian wargamer. Is it just a gamer who happens to be a Canadian and lives in Canada, or is it somebody with a specific interest in some aspect of Canadian history, or is there something about Canadian wargaming that's unique? And in your case, like you're exposed to a pretty wide audience, right, through your work with Battlefront, and you're like people. I'm guessing your YouTube channel is followed. You've got 1,000 subscribers now.
Yeah, just around 1,200, I think. And
wow,
yeah,
very good.
25% are from the U.S. 20% are from the UK. So still the majority of watchers are Canadian. I'm actually big in Cambodia.
Really?
That's kind of an accident. I've got some friends in Cambodia that a young man that I met a few years back who actually runs a barbecue duck stand in Phnom Penh, and I built his duck stand. in probably about 1/10 scale for a video, just for something to do. And he's a young, like he's an entrepreneur at heart, somebody kind of a kindred spirit kind of character that I met a few years ago when I was over there. And so I built that. Now his family and friends all watch quite seriously, at which I don't think any of them have ever played a whole war game in their life, but they watch. So which I totally appreciate. But yeah, still probably, I can't remember what the statistic is, but we still got probably more Canadian viewers than anybody. But that makes sense. Like, us, one thing that defines the Canadian gamer, at least the historical, is that we're tight knit. Because there aren't like giant hordes of us, because Canada is not a big country, and it's a big country, but not heavily populated, and we're spread out over a wide area. So we have to be, we have to find each other. We have to stay tight knit. And Canadian war gamers in general, outside of certain circles, I find are just amazing people to know, because everybody's passionate about the hobby and wants to do what they can to help people grow. like any skill that I offer up in terms of terrain building or painting, I don't want you to buy that from me. I want to give that to you to make your hobby experience so much better. And Canadian wargamers are the same, just more. Just more. I find. I mean, there certainly are people like that in other countries and other game circles, but I think because of how fledgling and small the group is, we have to be very we have to be keen on sharing and keen on spreading our passions over the hobby with each other. And there isn't a lot. I don't think there's a lot of a difference from a Canadian wargamer to a gamer in the UK, but every Canadian wargamer that I do know is intense in all of the right kind of ways.
That's well said. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I guess, our communal approach to things.
I have learned one thing from one of my viewers. I've got a loyal viewer who's been following me for a while, and he says his favorite part is my funny accent.
Funny accent.
So he's from the southern U.S. and so I guess the Canadian accent to him is quite amusing. Yeah. So he enjoys the miniature landscape hobbies on more levels than is typical because he enjoys miniature landscape hobbies for the learning experience of maybe learning about terrain and wargaming, and then he also enjoys it for the comedic experience of hearing my funny accent, apparently.
Sounds good to us.
Then you should start listening to Mike and I.
Yeah.
Maybe he does. I don't.
We're trying to be the Bob and Doug McKenzie of wargaming.
Joe, it's funny you should mention accents because it really something clicked when you said you grew up in Collingwood. So my wife grew up in Singhampton, just up.
Yes.
Yeah, and she went to the U of T and she's well traveled and worldly, but sometimes she's like a Grey County girl when she starts talking. And I when I heard your voice, I thought, yeah, Collingwood, Grey County, that's probably where he's from. And so. As Collingwood as you can get. Like, I was raised on the main street back when there was the whole other can of worms, but back when there was a downtown, when on Friday nights all the business owners, and their kids would be on the street, would be playing, and just when the community was a community, and the retail community in particular in downtown Collingwood. I mean, I was brought up stocking shelves when I was, I remember, operating the price gun when I was like 5 or 6, and Friday nights, all the store owners of the families would go downtown to run their businesses. In those days, we were open at 9 on Friday nights, and my brother and I would be in and out of the stores downtown playing G.I. Joe or Cops and Robbers or whatever, and that was just the way it was in those days. It was a fun experience. Yeah,
not that way anymore.
Yeah, Collingwood certainly changed. That's true. My wife Jo remembers it as being a gritty ship. In fact, I think she even saw one of the last side launches when she was a little girl. And there's no trace of the shipyards now. It's all so gentrified, isn't it? Goodness.
Yeah. It's all gone. The Fram development grew up down there. Yeah. I can remember watching. We'd stand in the middle of the main street. We'd come out of the front of the stores. And we'd stand in the middle of the main street and watch the ships launch. And then sometimes they would side launch. And if they had a big displacement, the water would actually wash up across Huron Street, just at the foot of the main street.
Wow.
I mean, they used to let, I think that was probably before my time, but they used to let the kids out of school so they could go downtown. They always launched at noon. So we would come downtown from the school, well, I would get out at lunch, but come downtown from the school, watch the ships launch, and then go to McDonald's on the way back up First Street, go back to school. So that was Collingwood in those days.
Very cool. So there's for those of you who are listening from outside Ontario, folks, there's a little Ontario history for you. Joe, you've been a really great sport, and one thing we're going to ask is for you to come back for a future episode from their chat. A couple of things. Yeah, a couple of things I'd be interested in hearing about is you mentioned in your last live stream you've done a little bit of 3D printing, and I'd love to chat with you more about where you see that in terms of
sure,
where that's going to take the hobby. And of course, now that you've joined the Napoleonics fraternity, because I was watching your Victrix unboxing video, and so excited. Look at it all! Look at it all there. Yeah.
Over there. Some people call it the pile of shame, but I call it the pile of glory. But it's
the pile of potential.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not shameful to have it. It's think of all the art, all the things that are yet to be created that will become, that don't exist now, that will later be, maybe people will enjoy looking at them. I'll certainly enjoy making them, right? So,
well, we'll look forward to following that, because James and I have a huge heart for Napoleonics gaming. Joe, before you go, we have a favor to ask. So this is something I've stolen from a British guy called Sean Clark's from his podcast, God's Own Scale. It's a great podcast. We have what we call the Canadian Wargamer Podcast Virtual Library. So we ask everybody to recommend 2 books. It could be a Canadian, could be just a book you love. It could be about military history or wargaming or whatever. So what have you got for us, Joe?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't think there's Canadian authors involved. It really should be. But so the first one I grabbed that I've been referring to a lot recently is Creating a Napoleonic Army by Peter Morby. So the thing is, and it's the work in it is okay, but he gets into the corners when it comes to answering questions about the small details. And from the point of view of me, like I'm one of these people that tries to be accurate. I won't sacrifice the fun of painting for trying to get something realistic, but I want to get it mostly realistic so you know what you're looking at. And the book is written with that in mind. And I really, really appreciate it, because from the point of view of like a complete amateur at Napoleonics, it really helped me get on my feet.
Cool.
So I quite like that one, Creating a Napoleonic Wargame Army, 1809 to 1815, by Peter Morby. And then, because I'm mainly a World War II guy, I have, so many books I could recommend, but this series here, the Fighting Men series, so Fighting Men of World War II, and then there's separate books in the series. There's Axis and Allied Forces, and it's David Miller is the name of the author. This book is great because it gets it's full of physical artifacts, like things that most authors will gloss over. It's like, oh yeah, and then there was a canteen on that belt, and off you go, and then next. Yeah. But it's like, well, that belt was brown until 1943, and then it was black, and then the canteen was gray until this date, and then it was Dunkelgelb, and then they ran out of Dunkelgelb, and it was just primer, and it answers the questions that probably only serious wargamers want to know.
Yeah, but, when you've got the figure in your hand and you're painting it, and you go, what is that? What am I looking at here?
Oh, for sure.
Exactly. Actually, this book, I did that just in particular because I was painting Mitchell's British. It was painting his British cannon that comes with the one black powder set, and I got down to painting the cannon, and I'm like, I have no idea what color the carriage is. Like, I don't, what color is a cannon carriage, a British cannon carriage in 1815? Does anybody know that? I don't know that. But there it was in the book. Like, well, bluish gray. Okay, fine, done. so it's just one of those things that only wargamers worry about. Anyways, hopefully that answers your questions for the books. I do have to go get Mitch. Anytime you guys want to grab a hold of me, just contact me through Facebook. I'd be happy to participate in the podcast anytime you want.
Yeah, that's great.
You might.
I was just going to say, we'll put links to your Etsy store and your YouTube channel in the notes for this podcast. And we will follow you with great interest, my friend, and we'll chat again.
Thanks a lot. I'll be out there until I hear from you next time. I'll be out there listening to you guys. So I really, really appreciate it. And it's great what you guys are saying. Like, there's the Canadian wargaming community is a group of amazing people, but we need glue to hold us together. And I really appreciate the time that you guys put into it, to committing to be at least part of that glue to help bring us all together. Oh. And you'll see me, unless I get struck by lightning, you'll see me at Hot Lead with bells on, and we'll do some awesome stuff.
All right, cool. Okay. Thanks.
All right, have a good night, guys. Thanks a ton. We'll see you. Bye.
Bye.